Welcome to GausRoth Tutorials. I'm GausRoth, and today we're going to create a target shooting minigame. And this is like my fourth time recording this video. I apologize for it taking so long for it to come out. However, always check to make sure your mic is plugged in before you record. It's very important. Originally, I did create this script while I was recording, but I ended up with a bug and a 2-hour long recording, and then once I cut all the nonsense out, it didn't make sense. So here we are. We're going to go over everything one step at a time. So we're going to go to build mode. We're going to look at our gun first. Our gun has, turn around. Our gun is visible. It's set to collidable. We need this to be able to grab it. We have our motion set to interactive and our interaction set to grabbable. We have the gun controller script attached to the object, and we have our projectile launcher. This guy right here, this arrow, its blue pill is connected to the projectile launcher on the script. Under more, we have grab lock on and grab anchor on, which gives us this nice handy dandy blue hand here, which has been upgraded and looks awesome. And then the rest of the settings are default. Now if I go into the group and open up our projectile launcher panel, we have our preset set to pistol, speed at 100, player collision is set to no players because this is a target shooting game, and then our object collision is set to all objects except for the launcher's group, and that is because since it's in a group, we don't want the group colliding with the projectile. We have static collision on, and then the rest of these are set to default except for the color is set to green. We have the projectile launcher script attached with our platonic 01 mesh object, which is like a 4-sided die. It's the cheapest object in the game that I know of, and we use that to hold our game manager script. So we connect the blue pill on the mesh object over here, and to go over the game manager object, we have visible set to off, light and shadow set to off, collidable set to off, and motion set to none. So all of the settings are set to the default except for these here. We have the game manager script attached. Next, we're going to go over this trigger. And I just accidentally hit something. Our trigger is enabled on and set to on player enter. We have the player stat script attached, and this text object is linked to our text box variable. We have 3 leaderboards. Each one has their leaderboard set to the proper one, so hits, misses, or shots fired. Display title is based on which leaderboard they are. I have the number of entries per page. This doesn't matter. You can have it set to 1 if you want. It's just a little bit smaller, or you can set it to 10. Anchor style is static because billboard is just weird for a leaderboard. Maybe if it's like super large and very far away, it might make sense. But in this case it doesn't. And this new panel UI mode, this is brand new. I think this is version 108 that came out yesterday, and it has your standard light mode, and then you have dark mode, and dark mode is awesome. I love the orange. It looks really good. Whoever designed that, thank you. Alright, and that is it for the objects. I mean, we have our spawn point, but I didn't do anything with it. It's just a standard spawn point. And I have these walls here. They're invisible, and they're just set to collidable so that the projectile launcher hits them instead of going off into oblivion. Now we're going to go over our gun controller script. Open that up. So, when world is started, this starts off with all scripts. It can be found under events and events when world is started. We're going to transfer ownership of self to null and transfer ownership of projectile launcher to null. So the transfer ownership can be found under actions, and you scroll down to player. So here's player, transfer ownership of object to player. So you just drag that in just like that, and then you put in your variables. Self is under values, scroll down to value input, and here is self. That references the object the script is attached to. Null is a player variable I created. It never gets set, so it's an empty player variable. Projectile launcher is an object variable I set, and then the projectile launcher on the gun is linked to it. So we're transferring ownership of the gun and the projectile launcher to null. When object is grabbed by player can be found under events, and then under grab events. So when object is grabbed by player, you just drag that in there and drop it in, just like that. We're going to transfer ownership of self and projectile to the player that grabbed it. When object is released can be found under grab events. So when object is released, same thing, grab it, drop it, and then you can add your code. But when the player releases the gun, we're going to transfer ownership of self and projectile back to null. And then when index trigger is pressed while grabbed by player, that can be found under controller events. Here's controller events, and then it's when index trigger is pressed, drop it in. And we're going to launch projectile from the projectile launcher. Launch projectile can be found under actions. Go up to object, and then scroll down to launch projectile. You can also use launch projectile at speed. This allows you to adjust the speed in the script. So maybe depending on certain variables, you might want the bullet to travel faster or slower. Now for our projectile launcher script, we have when projectile hits interactive object, gives us the object, the position, and the normal. So this can be found under events also, and under projectile events. When object hits interactive object, we're going to send respawn target to the object that was hit. So interactive object means any non-static object. So our target, for instance, is a static object, and I didn't go over this object, and I apologize. So when I say static, none is static. Animated, interactive, those are interactive objects. And since we're here, I'll go over it. The only difference with this object is that it has the target script, and it's set to animated. That's the only difference between any other cube in the game. Now you can find the send respawn target under events, and you scroll all the way up to the top, and then event actions, send event to object, and then you can pick the event from in here, and we drop in our object variable. This is the target. If you have multiple interactive objects in your world but only want a certain one to be hit, what you can do is you can create an object variable, call it target, and then check if target equals object. And then you would drop this in. But since now we created a target variable, so we have to go into the gun, open up our projectile, and we have to put in an object in that target. And since this is the only target we have, we can do this rather easily. If you have multiple targets, you'll have to create a list of targets, check if list contains. If we had, say, 2 targets, this one is just an empty object. We can take off motion and turn off the script, and you'll see what I mean. Now if I shoot that target, it moves, but I shoot this one, nothing happens. But if I shoot that one, that's because we're checking to make sure, well actually, that's a lie, because this one's no longer, oh no, it's animated. Okay. Yeah. So that's how you can check to make sure that your object is hitting the correct object. Let's go back into that. And then we're going to send set hit target to game manager with owner of self. Game manager is a object variable I created, and it has this object attached to it. And then owner of self can be found under actions. Then you scroll down to player, and then you have owner of object. Drag that in there, and then we're looking for the object, the owner of the projectile launcher, which this script is attached to, so we drop in self. When projectile hits static object, this one can also be found under events where the projectile launchers were found. So projectile events, when projectile hits static object, you just drag it in there. And we are sending miss target to game manager with owner of self. Now notice these both have a position and a normal. So the position is the actual position of the impact. So if you have, say you hit it like right here, so it'll return this position. Normal returns this whole face, so just this whole side. And that's pretty much it for the projectile launcher. Next is the target. This one's got a lot of math involved. So this one, what we're doing is when respawn target is received, and that is found under events, when event is received, and then you set the event to the one that is sending. We have several number variables, a lot of number variables. One for min x, max x, min y, max y, min z, max z, and then temp x, temp y, temp z. Now the reason I do this is because I want it to randomly select a location within these bounds. Now if I were to move this, it won't work because I hard-coded the values in here. You can take the starting position and then subtract and add to it that way you can just drop it anywhere. But for this works just fine. We're going to set temp x to a random integer between min x and max x plus 1. Set can be found under values. Values set to. We're setting temp x, which is a number value, to a number that this returns. So random integer takes in two numbers. Your min number is inclusive. Your maximum number is not. So say you have 0 and 100, it will pick a random number between 0 and 99. So that's why I have max x plus 1, so that way my max x is included in the random generation. And then I do that with temp y, temp z. So once these three numbers are set, we move the target to the new vector temp x, temp y, temp z. And we can close out of that. And then we have our game manager script. So this one requires player persistent variables and leaderboards. And in order to set those, you go into your build menu, go to systems and leaderboards. You're allowed 3 leaderboards. Hit the create leaderboard button, an interface comes up, and then you can set your leaderboard, or you can go in and edit them later. I have a video on leaderboards that goes over this in detail. Player persistent variables, we need those as well. We need 3. We need one for hits, misses, and shots fired. And you can reset your values, but not other people's values. And in order to create one, you hit the create variable, you get this interface, you give it a name. It has to be a number, unfortunately. Hopefully that changes, but you can also edit them later, change the name of them, whatnot. So we needed the 3 player variables and we need the 3 leaderboards. Now when hit target is received with player, so when the projectile hits the target, it sends hit target with the owner of the projectile. So whoever is firing the weapon, that is what this is, that player variable. We're going to set hits to get user persistent variable hits value for player plus 1 for player. Now that's a lot right there, and what we're doing is we're setting a PPV to itself plus 1, and we can find that under values. Values, set player persistent variable to, so we drop that in and we set the PPV to one of the PPVs we just created. So in this case, hits. Now it's asking for a number, and since we already have the number, but we want to increase it by 1, we have to take a plus sign, drop it in there, and then we're going to get the PPV that we already have. Whether it's 0 or 1 or more, it doesn't matter, it's fine. But we're going to get the persistent variable for hits for the player that shot the target. We're going to increase that value by 1, and we're going to set the hits variable for the player to this value. We're going to do the same thing with shots fired, and then we're going to set hits, which is a leaderboard for player, to that value we just set. And just to show you that, under values, set world leaderboard score for player, we're just going to drop that in. You want to make sure it's after we set the variable, because if you put it before, it'll be the old value. And you just set hits, so you pick the leaderboard you want to set for the player that you want to set it for, and then you set its value, so we can just get our player persistent variable that we just set previously. Now what this is, force off on, if you have it set to on, what it's going to do is it's just going to override whatever number's there, whether it's smaller or greater, it doesn't matter. So I'll say I have 28. If I put force on and I have 0, when I shoot my first target, it will override it and it'll put 1. And then when miss target is received with player, we're doing the same thing, except for we're setting misses to misses +1, getting our shots fired +1, and then setting the misses leaderboard to our count of misses. And that is it for the game manager script. We still have our player stats script. So this one we're going to set a text box. That's all we're doing, is setting that text box in that green frame right there. So in order to do that, we need a string variable and a object for our text box. And when the trigger is entered by the player, what we're going to do is we're going to set stats to nothing, just in case there's some text in there or somebody went in there while somebody was already in there. It's going to clear it out, and it's going to update it. So we're going to set stats to stats plus shots fired with a space plus our shots fired PPV as a string. Now in order to do this, we're using our set2, which is under values, but we're setting a string variable. So when we set a string variable with a number, we have to cast this as a string. And in order to do that, under values you have typecasting, and we can cast our number variable as a string, so that way the system knows, hey, this is a string. And then we're going to do the same thing with hits, except for we got a BR in front of hits, and all this is it adds a line break. And if you're interested in more text formatting, I do have a video on text formatting. So we're getting our hits, then we're getting our misses, and then we're getting our accuracy. Now accuracy has to, have to do some math. I'm using floor, and that can be found under operators, and then under basic math we have seal and floor. So what these two do is they round to the nearest whole number. So if say you have 46.6 and you use floor, it'll come back as 46. If you use seal, it'll come back as 47. And that, I only do that because it looks cleaner. So we're going to add the floor value of our hits divided by our shots fired. We're going to multiply that by 100. And the division and multiplication can be found under basic operations. Under operators, we have our division and our multiplication. And then once that's all done, we're going to display stats on text box. And this display can be found in actions. You scroll down to text, and we have display text. And you just bring that in, put your text variable, your object that's holding the text box, and it displays it. Now when trigger is exited by player, we're just going to set stats to blank and display that, so that way their stats aren't displaying constantly. Alright, so we can get out of that. And then just to show you what that kind of looks like, we're going to grab our gun. We have 28. And there is a glitch, so if I shoot this right now, it's not going to go up. Oh, yeah, see, now it wants to go up. See, sometimes it don't go up. I think it's because I waited so long. Anyway, in edit mode, there is a glitch with sometimes it doesn't count the first one. So that was actually one of the issues I was having. And yeah, but now I got some shots fired. I got 48 shots fired. I missed 14 times, and I hit the target 34 times. Now if I go into this trigger here, it tells me shots fired, hits, misses, and then it gives me my accuracy. So I have a 70% accuracy right now. And that's pretty good, I think. But again, target is huge, and this gun is really easy to fire. The accuracy on this thing is amazing. All it is a half donut in a cylinder. And that's all I have for this video. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns of the video, or have suggestions for a future video, please let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you liked the video, if you learned something, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I tend to come out with a video once a week. I aim for Mondays, but it's Wednesday, and I'm still recording. So, it is what it is. Life happens, and it's summertime. It's busy. Anyway, yeah, thanks for watching, and have a good one.